Hello and welcome to this edition of our podcast on ESG, environmental, social, corporate governance, and of course, interlinkage of that with organization culture. My name is Akhilesh Mandal. I'm your host. I lead India operation of Hofstede Insights. We are a global culture advisory firm headquartered in Helsinki, Finland. Our focus has been primarily aligning organization culture with business strategy and purpose. We also work extensively on building multicultural intelligence for naturally more cross-border teams, more multinational teams working together, and consumer culture for marketers. My guest today is Bhaskar Pramanik. Bhaskar hardly needs any introduction as such. Former chairman of Microsoft India and several other lead roles that he has had in last 4 decades of his professional career, Bhaskar today sits in several boards and advises organizations and leaders. He is very, very passionate about today's topic and strongly believes that organization culture is the key enabler to move forward towards any such transformational directions, such as ESG and so on and so forth. So without any more ado, Bhaskar, I would get straight ahead, asking you a few questions, and your reflections, of course, is the core key component of this particular podcast. So tell us, Bhaskar, from your vantage point of board members and advisors to corporates, how critical do you see is this for organizations to embrace ESG?
Yeah, it's actually become very critical and important, and I think it was to a large extent triggered by COVID, and thereafter, I think all the challenges which we're facing in terms of climate and environment, I think has sort of raised this subject to the fore. I think companies now realize that it's very critical and very important to embed ESG into the strategy of the company.
So,
It's
so
also receiving a lot of attention, especially here in India, primarily because the government of India has actually mandated that the top 1,000 listed companies in India must start reporting their ESG initiatives.
So it has moved from a kind of compliance to a business imperative already, or it's in the progress?
I think to a large number of companies, it's still, it's a compliance related. It's triggered by, like I mentioned, the government of India's rules around BSR. But I think there have always been the leaders of the pack who have embraced sustainability as part of their overall strategy for many years. So I think it's a mixed bag at the present moment. I would say that there are at least 20% of these companies, both large and small, which have embraced sustainability, have always focused on governance and used CSR from a social perspective to meet their social requirements. But I think the consciousness is now coming
Mhm.
that if your purpose is only profit, then you have a challenge in terms of creating an agile and resilient business. So therefore, government mandate, I think investors are insisting upon it. I think your employees are want to participate in making the world a better place. The new generation of consumers are also very conscious about the fact that they would like to work with companies which are focused on ESG initiatives. And I think we're seeing climate, the volatility in the climate every day. So therefore, I think it's moving from being a compliance requirement to actually ensuring that it is part of your overall strategy.
So given all these, given COVID, given the fact that sustainability is a major problem and ESG is the way to go, are all these in a way creating an opportunity for organizations to reevaluate their purpose? Should they go ahead actually reevaluate their purpose?
Yes. I think, I've seen a large number of companies relook at, their vision and the mission, but primarily from the perspective of purpose. Now, what's the difference between purpose and vision slash mission? Vision slash mission is basically your inward, perception about yourself. It's what you want to do, while a purpose is how others perceive you, how you want others to perceive you. And there's a big difference between the two. One is an outside in, the other one is inside out. How do you want to position yourself to the external world? So there's a subtle difference. Purpose is all about, what you can contribute to the world, what the world will miss if you were not there. So I've seen a large number of companies which have actually reevaluated this purpose over the course of the last 4 to 5 years. I mean, the most recent example I can think of is Reckitt Beckenizer, which Beckinser. I find it tough to pronounce their full name, but everybody knows them Reckitt because you use their products on a multitude of different cleaning products, shoe polish, healthcare products. But you always thought of them as a product company. They just recently had a change in leadership, and the new CEO has come out with an awesome purpose. And the purpose of Reckitt Beckinser now is to create a cleaner and healthier world. Now that actually, is gives you the opportunity to do a lot more than what you're currently doing, and their focus is to ensure that their customers take the best possible care of themselves. So, in a sense, you got the purpose, which is a cleaner, healthier world, and their mission, which is to make sure that their customers take the best care of themselves. So using that, they've actually, worked on their overall strategy and, bringing about changes, both in multiple different areas.
How does an organization go about executing this strategy? Because obviously there are many stakeholders to this. There are people working in the organization who needs to get engaged to all of these. Tell us how does actually all of these get into the operating system of the organization?
So you're correct that you can put it into your purpose, you can link it to your mission and your vision statement, but at the end of it, if it is going to permeate and actually translate into results, then you've got to build it into what I call the operating system of a company. Now, the operating system of a company is, for example, the starts with the product strategy of the company. So, what are the products which you are making? What are the areas which you want to focus on? What technologies would you use? What kind of services will you offer? So it starts with that portfolio of your strategy of your products and services. And you have to relook at that and figure out what perhaps stays, what moves out, what perhaps you need to, from an acquisition perspective, if you have to fill in the gaps, or if you want to actually sell off certain products. So you need to relook at your products and portfolio and strategy. Number two, you have to look at your people and culture because it's the talent which you have in the organization which will determine, and you have to you have to work with them to ensure that they actually understand the ESG, what needs to be done, and then take it from there. People and culture are critical because that's what I call the collaborative engagement part of an organization. It's what people do without being told. And that's why, it has to be instinctive. So if you're saying that, these are my ESG principles, then if people understand them, then and you have the appropriate culture, then people will follow those instinctively. So starts with your product portfolio and strategy. It has to be embedded in your people and culture. You have to reinforce it with performance metrics, which decide what goals you are going to achieve, and then you measure those, and then you report against that. And people's performances are actually measured against that. Have they achieved their ESG goals? as part of their overall, performance or their execution of the job. And including capital allocations, you have to then decide that, look, if this division or this department is really fulfilling its ESG obligation, then perhaps the capital allocation can be given more. So it's also in terms of the performance and the metrics, both people and how you measure your business and how you do your capital allocations. And then it has to be inbuilt into your processes. So your systems and processes uh, has to be, for example, in the case of ESG, and especially around the environment piece, would you work with vendors who themselves have the best ESG practices? Or would you work with vendors who give you the cheapest price for their products, but perhaps do not have the right governance, perhaps do not have the right social goals in view, or perhaps who are actually, polluting the environment? So those are the choices you have to make. So therefore, your processes, including the how you assign vendors, has to be an integral part of your strategy. It's part of your operating system. You have to build ESG into that. And finally, I think as a corporation, you have to ensure that you take a position whether it's with industry associations or whether it is in public or in media, that this is who you are, this is why you believe it is important, why sustainability is important, and then you take positions against that, and you will perhaps support government initiatives or public initiatives which actually help you in terms of meeting your ESG goals. So to me, the operating system of a company is basically that. It's the product strategy, the product portfolio. It is about the people and the culture. It's about the processes and the systems which you follow. It's about the performance metrics, and it's also about how you position yourself.
And looking at today's millennials, who research of course shows that they are more purpose driven, so to speak. The engagement goes with some of those core purpose attachments. Do you see this is going to also drive to an extent bigger engagement with people if we build a culture which is where purpose is evaluated to embed sustainability in this, there are social consciousness embedded in this. Therefore, would that also, do you think, might drive better engagement to the core assets of organization, which is people? Is it
No,
already
absolutely.
happening?
In fact, whether it is the millennials or the Gen Z, they're much more conscious about environment, sustainability, governance, and therefore, whether they are consumers or whether they are going to be your employees, this is an area which is very, very critical and very important for them.
Okay. And so given all of these, Bhaskar, I'm sure organizations have moved. As you know, I've heard you often saying that earlier, the CSR, which was more often than not was a random act of kindness. That, as I hear now, has definitely moved a long distance, which actually is getting integrated to the organization's core purpose, its operating system. So, and obviously, it's far more relevant as we see today because of the all-around turmoil that we see. Sustainability or the lack of it is really looming large all over. Where is it all going? Do you see the progress itself is fast enough? Do you see a lot of consulting organizations are gearing up to advise organizations both on the purpose part as well as the organization culture bit?
No, absolutely. I think, you know, for any company to be able to consistently perform, irrespective of the strategy, I mean, or irrespective of the approach it wants to take, one thing is very clear is that you have to focus on the collaborative engagement to ensure that people do the right things without being told. Uh, and number two, it is the strategic execution. The strategic execution is more process driven, more scientific, better metrics, and all the other stuff which we talked about. So you got to do both parts of it. The collaborative engagement is primarily about the values, about culture, and creating the DNA of a company which is focused about meeting the purpose of the organization. So therefore, both are equally important. So if I look at the whole area of ESG today, they are, it's a big, huge ecosystem. You
Hmm.
have the big four accounting companies, which can help you to identify the areas of focus which align with your strategy. They can then tell you how to build the metrics, to build the goals. They can then do the assurance at the end of the year in terms of reporting. So you have, they will play a very, very big role. You have the management consulting companies, which can help you to determine the strategy and how you can, look at the areas which perhaps you hadn't even thought about before, much more blue sky thinking, perhaps changes in your product portfolio, or perhaps changes in your, systems and processes. You also have boutique companies, which basically help you more from a reporting perspective, understand the company, understand its current strategy, understand where it's currently operating, and then help to put together a much more cohesive strategy, which is primarily focused on the ESG and how can you meet that. So I think there's a huge ecosystem of companies which are being created. You have the financial companies today, which can help you to get the right kind of investments, who can help you to get the carbon offsets. So there's a lot of work in the financial services area. And then obviously you have various different kinds of industry associations, regulatory bodies who are focusing on trying to make it easier for organizations and companies to report, to measure, and to be able to be transparent with their stakeholders in terms of what they're doing.
So you have any advice for companies like us, Bhaskar? Companies like us who are essentially into culture advisory services. Do you see that, we have a role to play in this?
So I think culture is requires continuous attention and care. Uh, if you Like I said, success of any strategy or any approach is a combination of the culture and which leads to collaborative engagement, and number two is the science of actually execution and strategic execution. Both are critically and important. So therefore, the cultural aspects have to be kept in mind. And I think as demographics change, as new kinds of employees come in, as new practices have to be brought into companies and organizations, how do you reinforce that? Leadership behaviors play a very important part in creating a culture or sustaining a culture. So I think there is a huge role for organizations like you to influence companies in who are taking this ESG journey, starting with defining or taking their current vision and mission and crafting a purpose which incorporates or inbuilds ESG into it, all the way to the collaborative engagement and the cultural building piece, which embraces ESG.
So thank you so much, Bhaskar. We are obviously, as I see your reflections are so deep, we can spend a lot of time on this. But for the limited time that we have, thanks so much for this, and thanks so much to all of you viewers for tuning in. Because as I said earlier, perhaps also sustainability is very relevant today, considering all that is happening, all the turmoil that we are seeing across the globe. However, we need to wrap this up. So once again, sincere thanks to all of you for tuning in. And Bhaskar, what can I say? It's always so educating listening to your powerful insights. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Akhilesh. Thank you for having me on the show. Thank you.
Thank you.